The Converted Man here. So I thought I'd do some mussing on what it was like to have faith, thinking back to when I believed in God and when I had faith in Jesus and all that, and trying to explain what that feels like to those who have never had faith. There's quite a number of people I've met via YouTube that have never had any belief in God since they, grew up. I mean, it's just they weren't exposed to it, or they heard it and just was like, yeah, that's a bunch of nonsense or whatever. So, what is it like to have faith? Man, how do you describe any emotion, really, without referencing some other emotion? I guess the closest I think that anyone can really come to it is to think of some emotion like love or desire. Probably, I think longing would be the closest, because you're engaging yourself in open talk, but you think you're talking to God. Of course, you're just talking to yourself, but you believe you're talking to God. So it's like you really want there to be a response, but you also kind of know that you're not going to get a response. But you're longing for some sort of feeling or hint or anything that would slightly indicate that God has heard you. So I think this is where people's minor miracle stories come into play, like, oh, I couldn't find my keys and then I prayed and then I found them, or, silly things like this that just seem so insane to the skeptics, There's like, oh, really? I mean, come on. Why wouldn't God do something useful, Well, because it's you. You're the God. You just don't realize it at the time. So anything that seems out of the ordinary is attributed to God. Hey, Beef Price, BJ Price. I can never always say it, think it's Beef Price. That's not the name at all. How's it going? But so I'm talking about having faith is awesome. Deathstroke says, yeah. Well, what do you have faith in? I don't know, but yeah, trying to describe faith to people that have not maybe had it in anything. I don't know why. It just came up as an idea to talk about in my head randomly. So BJ or BJ is okay. Well, okay. I have faith in God. No, you don't, Deathstroke. You don't. Amputees never pray to get their legs back. Yeah, that's true, Stargazer Jim. Or they might, and then it doesn't happen. But yeah, the prayers and things that you do as when you have belief are usually very mundane. Like, and you don't really, I think the other thing is you don't think about them too much after you prayed. Like, it's like, okay, well, that takes care of that problem. So it's kind of a way to get rid of stress. But that's really all it's doing. It's not going to affect anything else, telling someone that you've prayed for them might make them feel better, but it might make them feel worse. Like, oh, no, I didn't think I was that bad off that I needed prayer. They've done that sort of study. So you never know. But when you believe in God, and I suppose when you believe in anything really that you don't have, ample proof for, although I don't know at what point I would stop calling it belief and call it like knowledge. Like, do I have any beliefs anymore? Do I just know things or think that I know things? Like, what's the best terminology to use? I don't know. God, no, not going to talk about that guy. So when I would talk out loud or in my head to God, I would, this is again a conversation that you're having with yourself, but you're telling your brain that it's someone else. So I think your brain kind of tries to give you what you're looking for. And so it probably, I don't know. I'm just talking off the cuff here, but I think that your brain like starts a feedback loop and it's like acts like it's another person so it can talk back to you since you're talking to a person, you know? And unlike like imaginary friends or whatever that you might have had as a kid or whatever, it's like you always knew that those were imaginary. You never believed that they were more than that. So it's very different with a God idea, because not only do you think it's there, but other people do as well. And there's a couple of stories I think that relate this pretty well. When I was young, I had written in the dirt the word God, and I thought that that was really like powerful to do that, because you don't like say the word God or anything. And then I prayed to God. I'm like, okay, if you're real, this will be here tomorrow. And then I went to bed, and the next day it was completely gone, like no trace of it. And now I don't know if I'm remembering this right, but I think I am. I didn't notice if the ground was wet or that there had been any wind or anything like that. So it's like, oh, it went away. It's a miracle. Like, so I prayed back to God. I'm like, okay, now I know you're real, because you're trying to get me to prove that you're real by erasing that. You're just trying to piss me off, right? So, you know, I mean, it's a win-win, right? No matter what, you 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 win that bet, you know, because either the word God is still there or the word God isn't there, and then you make an excuse for why it's not there. What were some other ones? I was really sure that I had the spiritual gift of healing and seeing spirits and stuff like this, and like other people would be like, oh yeah, you have that or this or that or whatever. And, you know, oh, that, I think that's the other thing, is everyone around you, you know, when you're at church or, you know, whatever, is agreeing with you that this thing exists. So that makes it much more uh much more believable, because everybody is saying that exists, they're singing at it, they're praying with it. And you know, it's just me, I've never figured this out, but there's got to be a reason for this. You stand up and you sing, and sometimes you sit down and sing, and you're like, yo, stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down. It's like, why are we standing up and sitting down all the time in church? And then sometimes you kneel to pray or whatever, but sometimes you don't, you sit to pray. So it's like, and then sometimes you stand up to pray. It's like, is it part of the, I don't know, the dressing of the church, if you will, to have you stand up and sit down at different points? Like, that's got to do something to your brain somewhere. I don't know. There's a reason for it. But the Quakers, I remember reading Piers Anthony. He wrote his biography. He was talking about the Quakers, and they would just sit there quietly and all start to shake, and that was like God talking to them or whatever. And it's like, well, that sounds boring as bleep. Yeah, meditation. Meditation can help you relax. And I think there's been some studies on it as far as like, because you're just quieting your mind and you're calming down your thoughts and your body and all of that. So yeah, it probably is a calming effect to it. I think there's been a few studies done about meditation. I don't, you know, I mean, if there's a ridiculous claim like, well, it will help you heal faster or something like that, it's like, well, I don't know. You know, is it really that the meditation is making you heal faster, or that you were told that it will make you heal faster, that's making you heal faster because your brain believes that that's true, and so the placebo effect kicks in, you know? And also there's the nocebo effect, which is an interesting phenomenon where they'll have people take pills and say, okay, you might get this or that side effect. And even though the pills are just the like salt or sugar or nothing in them, like they will report getting those side effects. So you can make somebody feel better with a placebo that's absolutely nothing, by telling them that it's something, and you can make them feel bad by saying it's bad. So, and then also, I think those same studies show that if the pills look different, that can change people's reaction to it. So that's odd. But I figure, you know what? Just give me the aspirin, because I know that works based on science, as well as I know it works. Therefore, my brain believes it works. Therefore, whatever placebo effect there is to believing that it works is there on top of that it works anyway. So, you know. Hey, Steven. Yeah, I've seen a few studies where I don't recall now off the top of my head, but I've heard that there are studies, I should say, where it's like, this is a placebo, and they'll take it and be like, I feel better. It's like, well, why? You did nothing. Here's a cup of water. Drink this. Okay. I don't know. It's go figure. Yeah, that's the thing with like studies with prayer or whatever. Like, whenever it's a Christian group doing it, you got to be really suspect of it, because obviously they're going in with a bias to get a certain result, and so they might ignore the data, in favor of it. I followed this when I was becoming skeptical. I was still kind of clinging on to my faith, but towards the end, and I had a friend from church, and these young people were out and evangelize and do all these like minor miracle stuff, and they were like all excited about it. Pardon me. And so I went with them, and I took a notepad to like record what was going on. And we walked through this mall pointlessly, and they stopped and they prayed for my friend, and he actually had jaundice, and he was looking pretty yellow that day. I mean, usually he was looking pretty, decent, like, but sometimes he'd look worse. And then like they were like, okay, so do you feel better? Like, we prayed for your thing. And he's like, yeah, I do. It's like, doesn't he look better? And I'm like, I don't know, I guess. I'm like, it was hard to tell. Like, was he less yellow than he was before? Maybe a little, but that could be just because it was going away. So it was very, subjective. And also, of course, the problem that they were saying that he looked different, so that might have influenced me to think that he looked different. But then I don't know if it was that same day or a different day, but we went to this bowling alley with this group, and they had started to pray for somebody, whatever, it's just randomly got somebody to pray with them. And it's like, well, what serious problems are they having? So here's a complete stranger telling strangers what their problem in life is. So just think about that for a moment. Hi, Shane. Just think about the idea that you would go out in public and that somebody would walk up to you and just say, hey, do you want to talk about the thing that's bothering you a whole lot in your private life? You'd probably be like, no to that, I would think, But if you say, I want to pray for you, they might actually tell you, the deepest, darkest thing to pray with them about. So what's this, what does adding prayer to that do? Because like, it's now socially okay to share my deepest problems with a stranger because of the word prayer, whereas before, if they didn't say pray, then it wouldn't be okay. It's really a weird phenomenon. But anyways, so they prayed for this random person, and then the one guy was fooling with his phone, and I don't know if he was taking pictures or whatever he was doing, but this one guy that was bowling, I think he was a bit drunk. He goes like, "You're taking pictures of me? I want to see the phone." He was getting really pissed off, and I was just like backing up. I'm like, uh-oh, and I'm writing down like, okay, if God was really like telling them who to pray for or whatever, wouldn't God have warned the guy about using the phone around that drunk guy? Because that made everybody uncomfortable. So why wouldn't God let him know, hey, look, don't be messing with your phone around that guy. He's drunk. He's going to get mad at you if you do that. So, put away your phone now. I'm just saying, if God was really talking to this guy and pointing out who to pray for, that should be a thing. Another thing that was interesting is they had this list out things that you've prayed for and then dreamed about or whatever, and it was my friend had really specific things. There was going to be this person in a 50s dress that had like from the 50s, the polka dotted dress that they'd wear in that era. And so I was like, well, that's really specific, because the other people's list was there's going to be somebody with a brown shirt. There's going to be somebody in a vest, and it was really, really common things. And I looked at those lists, and this is, again, before I really started to learn logic and stuff. And I was like, these are really common stuff. Now I'd say it's vague, but, I didn't have the terminology back then. And I just thought, I'm going to be looking out for my friend's thing, because if his things happens, that's really hard to just, shrug off. But these other things, they're so dang common, it could be anybody. And that's what turned out to be the hits that they got were, oh, look, there's that person in the vest. Yay! It's yeah, people wear vests. It's not, we didn't see the person with the 50s polka dot outfit on, so that didn't happen. And it was funny, because I was really hoping that it would. I really wanted to see that. Didn't happen. Wasn't there. Hey Johnny. Hey everybody. It's all good to see you. Hey Johnny, get to 400. About time. I told everybody that if they didn't go after Johnny's channel, I'd send the lobsters. So that must have been what did it. Let's see. Depends how you define a miracle. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of a thing too, where the definition of miracle seems to be whatever you want it to be at the moment. Of course, the definition of miracle and magic are almost identical if you look it up in most dictionaries, not all, but not to appeal to dictionaries or anything. But so, hi everybody, Hans is here. Oh, all the cool people are here. A God defined as a God confirmed? I don't know about that, because just because you define something, that doesn't make it real. You can't just define something into existence. Well, I know the definition of $1 million, but that doesn't make me have $1 million. That'd be great if it worked like that. I could just argue my way into having $1 million if things work like that. Premise 1, lobsters don't exist, or I have $1 million. Premise 2, lobsters exist. Therefore, I have $1 million. Where's my, So, oh, confined, not confirmed. Okay, that's different. Yeah, well, yeah, if you define a God at all, then you've limited it in some degree. God's, you hear this, God's nature. It's well, what's that mean? So again, back on the point of, what's it like to have faith? And again, I guess the closest I can come to really explaining that to anybody that hasn't had faith ever is just kind of this longing, a desire, and it's unfulfilled, of course, but you don't know that when you're actively engaged in the faith and the religion, because you are confirming that it's real for yourself whenever you go to church, or whenever you pray, or whenever you do whatever it is you do. I think he's alluding to the idea that God would have to be limited to accurately described by mere. Yeah, probably. Yeah, if God can do, quote, anything, that means, well, God can do anything, even the logically impossible. See, now that for some is no, that's not, no, God can only do the logically possible. It's well, no. You can't have it both ways. It's either anything, meaning literally anything, or well, the logically possible things, or God can only do what God can do that's within its nature to do. Well, that's why. How do you know? Why can't it do things that doesn't make sense? Like, well, but because we don't like paradoxes, just because we don't like them, that doesn't matter. It's God, right? It's like, look, it doesn't have to make sense. Like it would be paradoxical. Why not? It could make itself not exist and still do stuff because why not? It's just that magical. It's just that godlike. So a God that can't make itself not exist and still do stuff is not a true God. So God that's not incoherent is not a true God. So the only true God is an incoherent God, and you could reducto ad absurdum that. So therefore, your God that is coherent can't be a true God. Then they would go, well, I guess my God's incoherent. Nope, too late. But why wouldn't it? And I always, I thought about stuff like that when I had faith. I'd try to figure out what God would do or could do, or what God that was always the main thing. Like, what does God want me to do? And you see that what would Jesus do was getting pretty popular back in the day. Let's see, I prefer Johnny to get 400 prayer answered. Jesus exists. Mic dropped. Can an omnipotent God make a universe where it could do nothing? Yeah, sure. A truly omnipotent anything could do anything, including the logically impossible. But a lot of people have tried to rephrase omnipotent to mean logically potent. And there's been some videos about that. Like, look, we should just stop using the word. If you don't mean omnipotent, stop using it. Because you're not using... If you say omnipotent, then you incur logical paradox. And if you're okay with that, then great. If you're willing to say that, yes, God can make a rock so heavy it can't lift, then there you go. You're fine with a logically incoherent God. Who cares? If that's what turns out to be the case, then so be it. Now, I don't think that would turn out to be the case, but what do I know? It does seem that through basic observation of my life when I believed versus my life as a skeptic, is I've changed a lot, but the things that I once attributed to God are so much easier to attribute to mundane phenomenon. And I've told some of my God stories before, so I don't know if I've have any new ones to share per se or anything like that. But these are events that, well, first we have to rely on my memory, then we also have to rely that I'm telling the truth as best I know it, and then we go, well, how do we explain that? And it's like, well, even if we don't have an explanation, all that is an appeal to ignorance, to say, well, we can't explain it, therefore God, right? It's like, well, can you explain it any other way but God? Well, what if I can't? Then that means it's God? No, that's a logical fallacy. Can a God do? Yes, God could do whatever if it's omnipotent in that sense. But I again, it just depends on what type of God you want to try to imagine existing. Why do people pay so much attention to something they say isn't a thing at all? Well, that's a good question, Death. I mean, we've been asked. I've come across that question more than once on YouTube, for many reasons. First of all, a significant group of people believe in God. Like, 33% Christian, 33 whatever the bleep, and it's like, I think like 2% or 3% something atheist. Those are meaningless statistics, by the way. I haven't looked it up recently or anything. If anyone's like, I want to look it up, go ahead and tell me the actual stats that are known for the day. But yeah, it's a really small number of people that don't believe in a God at all, or an afterlife, or any of the supernatural things, or ESP, or CNN, or any of those other letters Alien abductions, conspiracy. There's very few skeptics, in other words, okay? So a significant chunk of the population believes X, and some of us don't. And that would be fine, but those people that believe X try to sometimes get that into politics, and then that becomes a problem because I don't want to pay for something that I don't believe in, and I also don't want that belief to become so powerful that it takes over the government. So those are worries that even religious people have because they don't want some other religion other than theirs taking over either. So other religions talk about other religions as well and complain about them because, well, they want to be in charge. But thankfully, America, and I don't know what it's like in other places, but has, protections, hopefully, supposedly, in place that separate church and state. Of course, how stable that is, well, who knows? But, you could answer that question by saying it's a hobby. I talk about religion, God, faith, whatever, because it's a hobby, because it's fun to do, or it's just I have nothing better to do with my time. That could be an answer, So there's many ways to answer that, but primarily I for myself and for many others, to speak about religion and God and things like this because someone else believes it, and I want to understand that person. I want to understand why they believe what they believe and to see if I can change their ideas or not. And maybe they can change my ideas or not. I don't know. But until I have that conversation, I don't know. So it's interesting, and that's true, I think, not just with God, but with anything, that somebody can say something wrong and you disagree with it, and then you go, okay, well, why did we disagree on that? Let's talk about that. Let's figure that out. Yeah, Johnny said the same thing I did. Do I think that an omnipotent entity should be? Yes. By the word omnipotent chaosism, I would go with literally can do anything, including the logically impossible or incoherent. But there's a debate there about, well, let's have a different word rather than omnipotent. Let's just say logically potent or something like that, so that we avoid paradox or whatever. But I just go, look, if you're omnipotent, then you can do things that don't make sense. Why not? Because, well, you can do anything. So why wouldn't you be able to do anything, including the absurd? Square triangle is even a thing. Well, it would be if the thing that could make anything would make it, but maybe it didn't bother to make it, so it's not a thing. So, yeah. So does it make does it make sense that a God that cares about humans makes a reality that doesn't seem to care about humans? Yeah. Now, see, there's the question that religion puts out there is it says that not only is there a God that made everything, which is already kind of a big claim to make, but also it cares about us. And you're like, raising my hand here. No, doesn't seem like it, And then every now and then on Twitter or Facebook, I'll see somebody post some starving child and be like, well, what about this? It's like, your God doesn't care. It's like, yeah, well, but see, that's because of sin. See, that's not God's fault. It's humans' fault. Or, well, humans could feed that kid, so they're not doing that. It's like, look, yeah, but God could also just make them not be skinny anymore instantly, right? Well, yeah, God could do that, but because of reasons, God won't do that. Like, or maybe God doesn't care. Maybe everything was made for the lobsters. You all knew I was going to go there, and we are just a byproduct of accidental evolution. But the true God is a God of the lobsters and cares nothing about the humans. But look at how bad lobsters are treated. Well, you don't understand. See, that's not God's fault. That's humans' fault. So maybe God is just a God of dirt. How do we know? And so either it doesn't care about us or it doesn't have any power to help us out. or both, or it doesn't exist. One of the three would have to be true to see the sort of things that we see happen. Because as humans, we think of something and we go, okay, if I knew terrible thing was happening and I actually could stop it, then I would stop that terrible thing. So a God that knows all the terrible things and has all the power that there is to have and isn't stopping those terrible things is a terrible God. You know, this is the argument of, what do you call it? Whatever that argument is. Somebody's going to tell me in chat because I'm being dumb right now. What is it called? Argument from evil or of evil. There you go. Thanks, brain. I'm not a Christian, but I find the history of Christianity to be fascinating. Yeah. I was going to, and hopefully I still will be able to do an interview with the Milwaukee Atheists, who have a fantastic channel where they do a lot of the history of Christianity, talking about the Trinity, talking about what happened at the Council of Nicaea and all these things. It's really interesting because it just blows open the claims of Christianity to have any sort of unique stay on, well, our religion's always been this way. No, it hasn't. Our religion's unique. Not really, or whatever. It's like, it's obviously not, because of so many forgeries and known forgeries. And yet there's things that scholars, what does it make? How do you become a scholar? That's always been a question that I've had in my head, but whatever. But all these scholars, pretty much agree that first and second, I think it was Peter, are forgeries, but it's still in the Bible. It's like, well, wait a minute. If you guys think it's forgeries, why is it still in there? Tradition, I guess, It's like, yeah, sure, it's made up, but, somebody will get something out of it, I guess. We'll leave it in there because, we don't want to mess with it, Somebody would be like, hey, my Bible's missing stuff. But I think that I would wonder what would happen to the Bible if you sat down with the original language and the current understanding of all those different scholars of all this different work, and set aside their beliefs, which would be hard to do because many of the scholars that care about the Bible are Christian or Catholic. So you'd have to take what they think with a huge grain of salt. And then you were to just, translate the whole Bible with all that understanding in mind, taking out all the things that people thought were forgeries. What would you be left with at the end? I think you'd have a very different book at the end of that process. It also probably take years. So good luck doing that. Whoever's going to do it. It's not going to be me, but yeah, problem of evil. Thank you. Maybe it's the free will of lobsters. Yes. God gave us the ability to change reality with words. That's a miracle. What the bleep are you talking about? I don't know what that means. Can we change reality with words? Well, I guess it would depend what you mean by that, because the words I'm saying right now may or may not impact anybody that's listening right now or later on to do or not do something. Maybe I said, hey, I need to pick up milk, and somebody's like, oh, I got to pick up milk too. So me saying that caused them to change their actions. But I don't know that that's really the sort of change of reality, because when I think about reality changing, I think of my desk suddenly levitating into the air or something like that. It's like, hey, red cup that's on my table, levitate into the air. Nothing, it's not doing it. I said it, but it's not working. Dang it. So reality didn't change to accommodate my words. So therefore, words don't change reality in that way. But they might impact other people. Hell, they might impact me, because saying something out loud might make me think that it's true. And so I might do something in response to it, or not do something in response to it. So in that sense, we might change each other, but I don't think that we could change, if your car breaks down and you start saying, hey, car, work, I don't think that's going to make your car work. So, the odds of anything, not just us, can be astronomical if you rewind it enough times. So I think that we might make too much of the quote miracle of us as humans. Everything that you can look at is the same probability that you are, or rather improbability if you rewind it far enough in time. So, I have a red cup that's plastic. You guys and gals and robots can't see it, but nonetheless, I have it. So what are the odds that it came into my possession, this particular cup? And if I rewound that in time, the numbers go higher and higher, so that, you go back to who or where I obtained this cup from, what store was it, what manufacturer was it, and so you go all the way back to when it was just plastic and it hadn't been dyed red and it might have been recycled, and you get to that point and you go, okay, so the odds of it getting from there to him are, and you've got some big giant number because it has to go through all of these things to get to the end, and so the numbers multiply, but it doesn't really mean anything. There's no significance to that. It's just that's how things are. This one guy, that does remind me of a faith thing, since this hangout that I'm doing here by myself is kind of about, what's it like to have faith. It was really boring sermon by this guy that was a missionary, and he started talking about a baseball and how it takes a team to make a baseball, and he went through the entire process of making a baseball from start to finish. He must have researched how to make a baseball, because his whole sermon was making a baseball, how it's done from the bottom up. And it was it was like, okay, we get it. We're a team and you want us to be that team for you to give you money. I get your shirt. I know what this is about. Just get to the punchline already. And it just went on and on and on with the baseball. And it was like, make the dang base. Get to the point. It was so boring. But sometimes you watch those shows on how it's made, but those are pretty short. This was like an hour-long sermon, so it was just like, But yeah, it takes a long time for a thing to become a baseball, and it takes a lot of people and a lot of machines, a lot of things in it. There was a thing about the guy made a, what was it, $1,000 some odd plus sandwich, where he got his own pig, he got his own plants to plant and whatever, and and all the time and trouble it took to do it, and it was however many months and whatever that went into it. But then you could get a sandwich for like $1 at the store, so why would you do that? And the reason is, well, because there is a point to be made about how expensive it is to just make something on your own versus having it outsourced to a large number of people and places. And that the reason that things are so cheap is because there's a lot of people and places involved that lower that cost down to where the profit is still maximal for them, but the impact is minimal for us. And it is really interesting. But yeah, if we rewound his sandwich enough, it's a miracle sandwich. You're still gonna eat it, but it's all right. So Chaosm's got to go. Let's see. Yeah, for analogies or language and fall through it. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what per se to say to any of that that's going on in chat per se. Faith is all you need. Satan apologists. We still haven't done a talk. Thought that they were actually as part of the Satan thing, but I guess not. But at any rate, yeah. Well, what's it like to have faith? Well, and again, I had faith once. Now I don't. What's that like? Man, what's it like to be non-faith? It's kind of weird, It's like I had this dream recently, and in the dream, I started to pray for something, and I'm like, no, I don't need to pray. Like, I don't believe in that. Like, I stopped myself from doing it in the dream, and I woke up, I'm like, what was that about? That's okay if I want to pray. It's not going to do anything. If I want to waste my time, I can, yeah, it's like, and there was one time that somebody I cared about was really down and feeling really bad. So I'm like, well, I was just out of ideas. I'm like, do you want me to pray with you? It's like, yes, they did. And I was like, okay, I'm an atheist, but okay. I'm like, hey, yeah, if there's anything listening to me, help this person out. Okay, kind of thing. And it was, but, I said it in a really sincere way. And the idea that I was willing to do that for them helped them. And that me doing it helped them. The prayer didn't do anything, I don't think, but that I was willing to go there to make them feel better actually impacted, maybe more so because I don't believe. So the best person that can pray for you is an atheist. That would be a good study to do. This person's an atheist and they're going to pray for you. Like, how much more effective would that be with the person? Maybe they're not really an atheist, but you just say that they are. It doesn't matter. But if the person thinks that the other person doesn't believe and yet is willing to do something as part of that religion for them anyways, I think that might have a deeper emotional impact on them. I don't know. It'd be an interesting thing to do. But I'm not going to do it. I don't know how to do those sort of studies, but somebody should do it. Still get prayer machine requests. They know what I am. Yeah. So pray for them. Who cares? Well, I mean, as if you think that it will help them to pray out loud with them and you want to do it, well then okay, but you might not want to do it, and you might also think that doing it might cause more harm than good. So it's something you'd have to weigh in your brain. But at the time I thought it would be helpful, and it seemed to make them feel better. So okay, great. I still, other than the fact that I said those words out loud, that's what made them feel better, not that there was something beyond us that hurt us and made them feel better. And if there was, then there's no way to tell the difference. And I think I've brought this up before in a talk I did with somebody, where we know there's this thing, they have this device called the God helmet, and it produces these magnetic waves, and it makes people think that there's God. And so I said to the guy, I said, let's say you're at home, or let's say it's somebody else, because he was having real trouble making it him. And they think that they've just experienced God. Now, what really happened was there was a magnetic field that passed by their house. Like, I don't know, maybe some truck was driving by with electromagnet on its back that was turned on for some reason, and that's what made them feel God in that moment. How would that person know? They didn't see the truck. They didn't see the electromagnet. They don't know. From their perspective, God just visited them. But in reality, it was the magnetic field. So unless you had equipment around you 24/7 that was constantly detecting magnetic fields, how would you ever know that it's really God, if there is a God, versus that it's just this magnetic field that makes you think it's God? And the answer is there's no way to know. You'd have to just believe that it's God, or Or I guess you could say, fairly enough, you'd have to believe it's the magnetic field. But the thing there is, we actually have the magnetic field. We know what that does. So, and we know that the Earth produces magnetic fields. And we know that that's the reason why people think that there's a God, is due to magnetic fields. So could it be that the only time that people experience God is when there's a magnetic field floating around? Maybe. Could be. Who knows? You know? And so when we have a natural explanation versus a non-natural or unordinary explanation, the natural one tends to win out. You know, they thought St. Elmo's fire, which is ball lightning, was magical or spiritual when they first saw it. That's why they called it St. Elmo's fire. You know, same thing with lightning. Of course, we always hear lightning. And rainbows. Rainbows are in the Bible as a sign from God that that the world will never be flooded again in the way that it was flooded or whatever. Well, yeah, floods still happen, but it's not worldwide, so it's okay. You know? No, well, so rainbows didn't exist before then? I don't think so, because we know what a rainbow is and how it works. So, well, physics didn't work that way until God made the rainbow, right? You'd have to believe. So now you have to believe another thing on top of believing that the rainbow is a miracle. You have to believe that God didn't make the physics work the way that they do in regards to light and water, you know, before the rainbow, after the flood happened or whatever, you know. So, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, but, you know. Let's see. The only times I don't feel God is when purposely Deathstroke. I thought you were a skeptic. I don't know. I don't know where you're going with this. I don't know. I'm so confused right now. I thought you were an atheist or a skeptic. I guess I was wrong on that. Well, what do you mean when you say God? Because everyone has a different idea of what that is. So, you know, I mean, would lead to a lot of questions. And then I would ask, well, I think the most important would be, do you just believe there's a God, or do you make the statement there is a God? Because the two are very different claims. I just, you know, if you say, I believe in God, then okay, you know, I've got nothing to work with there. But if you say there is one, well, then that leads into argumentation. Skeptical of everything. Well, then what do you mean by the word God? Like, what does that mean then? Because I'd have to know what that means. I guess because I, you know, talked about the whole faith thing for a while, I suppose I'll just drop the Google Hangouts link in the chat and see who joins in or whatever. And then, you know, if nobody joins in within a few minutes, I'll be like, I'm done because my voice is wearing out here. I don't know if I really answered the question that I asked in the video, but hopefully I think I got some of the idea across. And I talked about other things, so it's okay. I can't define it for you. Huh. So, well, you feel something that is undefinable, so yet you label that as God. So why label it as God rather than some other feeling? You know, so there's something to it that you're labeling it in the first place. I love this guy. Yeah. I'll join next time. Don't have a cam. You don't need a cam. You just need a microphone. I don't have a camera on this computer. I have one on the other one though. Undefinable to others. Satan's gonna hop in. That'll be cool. Maybe we can talk about satanic stuff. That'll be interesting. Although that I think they have that. If I remember, I talked to them once, and that's kind of just a off the cuff, silly name, not a serious one. I could be wrong on that though. Undefinable to others. Well, that's I didn't. Okay. So you feel thing that you can't describe. Okay. I mean, I don't know that I would call. I mean, if you, I guess calling it God is just as useful as calling it anything else. Looks. Sorry, I'm typing. Yep, I decided to not talk when I'm talking live. That's brilliant. I'm like, I'm gonna type this thing. Oh, I got somebody, I think.
Yep.
Hey, ex-split broadcaster.
Oh, is that what I'm called?
That's what your icon is.
Oh, yeah, I'm not too... I don't use Chrome ever, and I basically use XSplit to stream on Twitch.
All right, so Satan apologist, Satanist, whatever. So I think we had talked in text. I don't know if we talked it out loud. I can't remember now.
No, just in text.
Yeah, so because I had said, I had asked you if you were part of the Satanic Church, and I think you'd said no, but I don't remember now.
No, I mean, I'm more of a Levian Satanist than a temple. But I refuse to pay the money to join the Satanic Church because it's a bunch of bullshit. If you ask me, if they want membership fees, they can fuck off.
Is that the one that usually does the protests when, you see a sign that goes up, pray to God? They'll put up a billboard that says, don't pray to God or whatever.
Right. They'll scream and cry about equal rights, and if you put up a billboard for God, put up a billboard of the Baphomet, or put up a billboard of this or that, yeah, that's those guys.
Okay. Well, that might. I mean, I would suppose they're asking for money so that they can fund their activities in the politics, and I guess. But yeah, I mean, unless you're really into it, I wouldn't pay for anything unless like people with Patreon. It's like you have to really like them to pay the money, right?
Right. I mean, interesting thing is, I mean, I can understand asking for money to pay for dues and whatnot, but the only thing you get out of it is you get a little card. And the card, I don't even know what the card looks like. I haven't seen whatever they're producing now, but it's pretty much all done by hand. It's not automated in any form or way. And you just get a little piece of paper that says you're an active member of the Church of Satan. And I mean, just like the Christians, you can be a Christian without being an active church member. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, but what does it mean? Because when I was a Christian, we would say, "Oh, the Satanists, they're everywhere," and and we would picture people literally worshiping the devil, the Satan of the Bible, even though that guy's not really even in there, but we thought he was, and then we thought that there was people that would, killed babies, drank their blood, read the Bible backwards, and you heard all these rumors. But yet it appears that if that group exists, they're very, very, very small, because I've never seen that at all.
Yeah, right. I mean, the general, well, back in the I would say the whole satanic scare thing started in the late to mid 80s, 90s area with Tipper Gore, PMRC, Parents Music Resource Center, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering. And at the time during the 80s, America.
Oh man, yeah, the D&D was like, that was evil. Like that was
Right.
there was even that movie. Oh, it was bad. Mazes and Monsters.
By somebody Jaffe or something like that. Tom Hanks was the
and
star.
it was actually, I think it was based on like a true story that somebody supposedly based on a true story. Although, of course,
Right. It was based on a true story, but of course it was embellished for the television. It was
basically the guy goes insane. That's what happens.
Well, if you have a mental condition and it's agitated, it doesn't really matter what agitates it. Although what agitates it will direct it in a certain progression. Granted, it's still a mental condition that's been agitated by something, and it's not it and of itself. So, I mean, the whole insanity thing was already there. It's just he chose the fantasy world to really delve into.
But of course,
and
the movie's trying to point it like because of the D&D, he went crazy. Like that's the heavy-handed message, and then D&D is evil, avoid it, scary, scary, you know. Yeah, but Satan was everywhere when I was a Christian, in a way. But I mean, depended on the church I went to, and the amount that it was talked about. But every now and then, you would hear, you know, oh, those Satanists, you know, and they'd be reading the Bible backwards. That's not a thing, you guys. I mean, who would worship the Satan in the Bible? Like that idea. And actually, it's funny because I actually talked about the Satan of the Bible in reference to S.J. Thompson had said that the devil's a liar. And I looked up all these different verses about the devil, and even if you attribute all of them to the same person, which it's not, but you know, Christians do that, nowhere does he lie. It says that the devil lies, but nowhere can you see him actually tell a lie. So
exactly. Here's the thing. The neat thing about it is Satan appears in the Bible in three guises. There's Satan, the adversary. There's Lucifer, the morning or the light bringer, which is basically an allusion to Venus in and of itself. So not really Lucifer. And then there's the devil in the New Testament. Supposedly, these are
the tempter in the original in the Torah, which became the serpent and all that.
Yeah. Basically the adversary, adversary, and not just an adversary.
Right.
And
long
expose on Old Testament Satan, New Testament Satan, and whatnot.
Yeah.
Everything that Satan did, how many times he's mentioned in the Bible. He never lied. He never did anything directly to a human being. Job wasn't touched by Satan, if memory serves me correct. God did everything. I think the worst thing that Satan was actually allowed to do to a human being was give Job boils.
Yeah, I think that they did a video counting of how many people God had killed, and then, you know, as an add-on, somebody was like, and here's the 6 people that Satan killed with God's permission. Like, you know, and that might have included a couple people from the Job story or Job story, or however you want to say his name. But yeah, but that's not, now, am I correct in saying that's not the Satan that you, whatever, I don't know what to call it, you know, believe in, worship, or that's the church is not based on that Satan, or am I wrong on that? Is there 2 different Satans that we're talking about here?
Well, sort of, kind of, if that's an answer. The Church of Satan it's more, you can boil down LaVeyan Satanism in the following manner. It's aggressively pissed off humanism. It's do unto me, or basically do unto others as you have them do unto yourself. Unless they fuck with you, then destroy them. Well, I mean that's a really boiled down sentiment of it.
But it's not really a worship of the person Satan like you would have the worship of Jesus, right?
No, definitely not. They have these rituals and lesser and greater magic, but it's more along the lines of a tool to focus your energy towards achieving your goals and whatnot. There's no actual being as a theistic fallen angel that is a god to be worshipped.
Yeah. So the idea of people drawing pentagrams and summoning demons and all this, that's a product of Christianity, not a product of, at least not the Satanist church that you know about or that you practice. Yeah.
Right. The whole demon and raising demons and the Mike Warnke and the satanic scare, that's a bunch of bullshit. There is no supernatural.
No drinking blood?
No. Unless that's your thing.
I know there was at least one there was also, of course, vampires for a while. That was like, oh, they're going around and these vampires are drinking people's blood. But I'm like, they're not really vampires because that doesn't really exist. There's just people drinking blood. Like,
Right.
I don't know why you would do that, but I guess they're doing that. I don't know that they're really actually even doing that, but it was kind of a thing that was going on. Whenever that was going on.
LaVey proffered psychic vampires, and whatever, however he explained it. When I read the word psychic vampires, I put the book down and I was just like, yeah, whatever, dude.
Maybe that explains politics. They're all being sucked dry by the psychic vampires.
Could be. In America, I wouldn't doubt it, because
they went in brilliant, but now they're like, oh, I can target that person easily. So, but okay, so do you believe in a literal entity of Satan then?
No, I can say that quite easily. Definitely not.
And so, well, then the flip would also have to ask is, do you believe in a God?
Nope, definitely not.
Because a lot of people don't. Maybe I don't want to say that, but I think that sometimes you don't think about it. But you could be an atheist and believe in Satan because it's not a God, So technically, you'd be like, yeah, I don't believe in God, but I believe in Satan. I've met them. They're my ex-mother-in-law. Dun dun dun.
Oh, don't go there, because my ex-mother-in-law was something straight out of hell.
Oh, see, mine charges the devil for payments on how to be evil.
I can't argue with it. Yeah. They're evil. Well, any in-law, mother, father, brother, sister, any in-law is automatically, they're going to suck you dry, just like your family.
Hey, maybe they're the true mental vampire or whatever, psychic vampire.
Well, people lout and they tout family overall, and blood is thicker than water, and family this, family that, and I'm all for that, unless your family's just worthless, and then it's just like, hey man, look, there's the door, get on the other side of it.
Yeah. So, but when it comes to supernatural things or whatever, you mentioned magic. Now, is that with a Z or a K or G, or because there's different spellings of that have different reasons for why they're spelled that way, I think.
Well, the LaVeyan system, they have what's called lesser and greater magic, and it's more along the lines of a ritualistic thing that you can follow if you wish to center your, I don't know, psychic energy, if you want to call it that, or to orientate yourself better towards your goals. It'll center yourself and it'll help you achieve your goals better. And there's a lot of psychobabble in it. He basically wanted, my understanding of the whole thing is, he basically wanted to poke fun at the hubbub and the gibberish of like Roman Catholic Mass and the stupidity of the rituals of the church.
So it's like directed meditation, like I will succeed,
exactly.
I will succeed sort of thing. But it's not, when you say magic, it's not like, you're not talking about levitating a thing or whatever, that sort of, or trick, like Penn and Teller fool us magic.
No, definitely not. There's no supernatural elements whatsoever.
Why don't they just call it something else? Does calling it greater and lesser magic have some sort of significance other than to poke? Is the whole point, I guess, of the calling it the Satanist Church or whatever, to poke at religion? Is that kind of the point of it, or?
Well, people have, whatever the official church line of the church is, could be whatever and whoever, and then there could be many different interpretations of it outside of, like the breakaway, the Temple of Lucifer or the Temple of Set or whatever they're called, and the 13 angels or of whoever. And basically it was an iconic figure that was the antithesis of the hypocrisy that LaVey saw in the Christian church. He would play his organ. He was a calliope player in a carnival, and during the week he would see these guys, cohabitating over women and doing all kinds of fucked up sin type things, and then there are these really pious, God-fearing Christian men on Sunday, and I think it basically Lucifer and Satan was chosen as the antithesis and the opposite of the Christian church, which was pure hypocrisy in his eyes. Now, don't take anything that I say as factual.
No.
You know what I mean?
Well, these are things I would assume you believe or know something about, but you might not know everything there is to know about it or whatever. But right. I mean, of course, your whole avatar name, it's like, well, I gotta ask these questions. I mean,
oh sure.
What's this mean? What's this about? I gotta know.
Well, the whole Satanist apologist, it was supposed to be satanic apologist, but for some odd reason, YouTube and Google's weird. And basically, I created the Satan apologist handle in my conversations with SJ. And her videos and her Twitter posts and whatnot, because
did she react very negatively to your name? I would think.
Yes and no. I mean, originally my name was Squircifer, a conglomeration of squirrel and Lucifer. And she was kind of, okay with it and whatnot. But I tend to be
I want to see a Satan squirrel now.
I'll just go to I'll have to,
no, it's out there. I know.
Yeah, it's out there. I'll have to change the avatar from my cat to the squirrel.
Oh man, sorry.
But but talking to SJ now. This is the thing I have noticed about Christians, and if there are Christians listening right now, take this shit to heart. Okay, because this is how you're viewed.
Broad brush. You're painting with a broad brush, but okay.
Oh, this is a very broad brush. Now, my background is theistic, and it is Christian. I was raised in a fundamentalist Southern Baptist family. And I was on the path, and I was studying to be a minister, and I had completed part of my studies until I just wanted to get away from my hometown and my family, so I joined the military. But when it comes to Christians, there's basically two types of Christians. There's what I call the and this is not this is not supposed to be right.
These are well. Go ahead.
Right. It's not supposed to be derogatory in the sense of just being derogatory for derogatory sake. There's the dumb Christians, and then there's the liars. Now, the dumb Christians, they might be super intelligent people, but they believe in the religion for one reason or the other, and either they don't know the origins of the religion, they don't know how the religion developed over a period of time, and they have no idea, like when you delve into the authorship of the Gospels, who wrote what, how do we know, is it witness, is it hearsay, is it allegory? Is it scientific? How did the Bible develop?
Right.
How did Christian apologetics develop? How did the word atheism develop?
Yeah.
And then you've got the liars. They know good goddamn well that it's a bunch of bullshit, but they won't give it up because
it makes them money.
It makes them money, or they're in a position that they can't give it up. And that's just as bad as knowing, it's a lie, but
they developed the clergy project so that people
exactly.
I was like, but yeah, I mean, and obviously you can't tell one from the other. I thought you were going to go a different way with it. With my view would be that the dumb, quote unquote, Christian would be the one that just doesn't think about they'll read the Bible, but they don't think about the history. They don't think about why they're reading this in English. They don't think about what the prayers are doing or not. They just do the things. They believe in it, but they don't, it's not something they think about. deeply.
Well, those are the sheep.
Yeah.
I just call them sheep.
Sheep. Okay. Yeah, because I've met those, and then I've met the intellectual Christian that's like, I know, I'm the one guy that I really do admire still to this day. He had the Bible memorized. I mean, literally. He would be like, oh, that's first law. And I mean, it's like he had the entire thing memorized. It's like, well, see, now that to me, hypothetically, should be every Christian, because I've asked this before as a skeptic. I've said to Christians, do you think the Bible's the most important book in the world? Yes. They usually, I mean, I've never had no. I'll be like, okay, so you have it memorized, right? No. Because you don't need to know. The only thing you need to know is that Jesus saved you. I'm like, really? Do you really not need to know more than that? I mean, that could be a really small book then, don't you think? That's all you need to know. Because it's not just that. There's other things you need to know beyond Jesus saved you, right? Because you need to know who Jesus is. Yeah. You need to know what Jesus did to save you. Yeah. You need to know there's a God, right? Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot more to it, right? But they're lazy. They're lazy. And I hate that intellectual laziness. But with
they won't go beyond that point. No.
Yeah, with SJ, I think her I'm looking at her blog. I'm going to start to do a video series on her blog, like I did with Matt Slick's Karm page. I did it Karm Harm. This one's going to be Piper's Pillars. But looking at her webpage and going through the problems with the statements, what I've noticed is she'll try to define a logical fallacy on her own, which is good, but she'll get it completely wrong, which is bad. And I really love logic, so I'm like, look, no, this is how, look, if you want to say it, here's how to frame that correctly, and then you can say it this way, And, I've seen that a lot on her blog where, she's trying to give some examples of logical fallacies. Of course, it's like the atheists make, and I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. I don't. That it's like fine, yeah, sure. We make them. You make them. Everybody makes them. Well, but when you're going to point out what that is, then you have to actually use a decent example, and that's where I got. I'm like, and then of course the whole page of the so-called miracles of Mary and all that. It's just nothing. It's just a complete pile of nothing. Yeah.
Well, like I pointed out to SJ a number of different times on a number of different videos, different blog posts, and Twitter things. Her 5 answers or her 5 questions.
Yeah, different questions.
Her 11 questions. The martyrs prove. Blah, blah, blah.
That seems to be a recurring theme. Like that's what I was going to say about SJ. Is like seems to be that her faith seems to be based on this whole encounter that she had, and then this unresolvable question in her brain of, well, how else can you explain the martyrdom of the disciples other than that this really happened? Now, I don't know that. I think that there's more to it than that. There's got to be, but that seems to be a very big cornerstone of her beliefs.
Well, I personally think that she's full of, I mean, in the nicest way possible. She's a very nice person. I haven't found anything mean about her or nasty or anything, but she's dumb. She might be a business teacher, but when it comes to apologetics, she's really rather, she's not quite able to grasp some of the mental gymnastics that you have to be an apologist. You have to dispel logic. You have to dispel reason. You have to have presuppositions in order to be a Christian apologist. And any Christian apologist who says differently is lying through their teeth, and they're in it for the fucking money. And I personally believe she's trying to get the YouTube dollar and the Patreon loot. She's building her way up like another Christian apologist that I engaged with. He'll remain nameless. But he basically was building this YouTube ministry up, and he was using apologetics and almost the exact same apologetics as SJ. And when I engaged him and got really nasty about it, I'm really calm and I'm very polite up to the point that I realize that it's useless. And then it's just like, you're a cunt. I have no more use for you. You know,
Yeah, I mean the last two talks I did with Christians have ended pretty badly, and I blame my own anger issues on that I have, that I have to work on in my brain. But the one I had with SJ was pretty decent of a talk. I mean, we got to this one point where they said something like, well, if you're going to be rude to your people on your channel or whatever, you're not going to hurt. I'm like, well, I'm going to be rude to you because I hadn't been rude. I'm like, okay,
Right.
well, now I'm going to be rude. If you're telling me I'm being rude suddenly, I'm not being rude, but I'll be rude to you if you want, And
Well,
it's like,
if I ask you,
go ahead.
Well, if you ask me the question and I answer it, and you're not happy with that answer, and you ask me the question again, and I explain my answer in depth, but you're still not happy with it, and you ask me the question a third time, then I'm done, because that tells me either one, you're too stupid to understand what's going on, or two, you're just a shill and you deserve anything that comes your way, from AIDS to cancer to fire to people to whatever.
That's pretty brutal.
Well, I'm rather old.
Well, that's why you're a Satanist. Right.
That's true. I come from an entirely different generation than the majority of people alive today. I was born in '69. So
okay, you don't sound old.
Well, I'm old. I have been a number of things in my life. I have been an idiot. I have been the typical teenage. I'm a retired security officer.
Do you have a deconversion story of any kind? This is now going to be the what's it like to be called about faith / talking to Satanist apologists. That's great. Okay.
Well, sure, I could give you a deconversion story. There's more than one, and they all tie into each other. But the base one is, you read the Bible, and you're told these things in church. You're not really allowed to question them. You're allowed to question to a point, and to the point is, the answer is God works in mysterious ways. That's the will of God. Who are you to question God?
Yeah.
And reading these things, and then being in the military, having a family, and being deployed to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait for the first Gulf War, and what happened within that time frame that we were there, and the actions that were taken, and the things that I witnessed and experienced firsthand, and the things that I've done firsthand, completely dispels the entire notion of anything the Bible would have to say is right, just, and loving.
Yeah, because war is hell. I mean,
because the Iraqis at the time, they believe in the same God that the Christians do.
Yeah, just a different version of it.
Well, not even really a different version. They just don't accept Jesus, but it's the same. It's the same God of Abraham. It's the same God that Jews worship. And for them to pray to God for their side to prevail, and then for our side and the chaplains that would come to the batteries to hold services, and and the entire Gulf War lasted 98 hours.
It seemed longer than that on the news. I mean, I just remember lots of reports. Are you talking about the first one or the storm, or which one are you talking about?
The ground war, the actual ground war. It's only 98 hours. The carpet bombing began in January, middle January, roughly. They started carpet bombing, and then February the 21st, memory serves correctly, was when the ground war started. That's when they breached the berms, and they entered into Kuwait and swung around through Kuwait and was going towards Baghdad. And that entire process took 98 hours. Now, if God is the same God on both sides, okay, how did God defeat God and let God prevail?
Yeah. Wow, I didn't think of it like in that perspective when it was going on. I didn't even think of that at all, because I mean, it's just, it's weird, because at the time I believed in God, but I guess you don't think about certain things in that way. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're just like, it's just God exists, and it's like, you might think, if you happen to think about God at that time, then you would probably find a reason for what's going on. But, you know, I didn't think. I was just like, oh yeah, that's a war, this sucks, you know, or whatever.
Well, when you read the Bible, God basically backed up his people, and he would allow his people to kick ass.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you know, so many thousands years later, this same God is basically on the same teams as the opposing sides in the war. And you know, the Iraqis
you could say if two different people pray for their sports team to win, only one of them's gonna win. So it's like, it's God on their side now, you know. It's kind of the same. But yeah, I mean, I think that you
almost.
Yeah, I think it's kind of different because you were there, and it's because you're facing an opponent who essentially believes in the same God that you do, but is you know, you don't want to hurt them or kill them per se, but they're, you know, and they don't want to hurt or kill you, hopefully, although they
wanted to.
They wanted to, yeah.
They firmly believed that they were right and God was on their side.
Now,
and we had soldiers that also firmly believed we were right and God was on our side.
Yeah, so how do you determine who's right in that sort of thing? That's
right.
kind of, yeah.
And the Old Testament God was a God of war. Okay, when you read, Christians get really mad when you point this out, and they say, "Oh, well, that's the Old Testament, and the New Testament nullified that, or the New Testament fulfilled the law, and God no longer had to be."
I came to bring a sword.
Right. And you know, and the Bible says specifically, God is God, and God don't change. So
yeah, can't have it both ways.
Right. You have this bullhorn deity that's like, I will smite and kill and crush. And then, you know, 1,500 years later, he's like, oh, I'm going to rape this Jewish girl, give birth to myself, and become a hippie.
Wow. Well, I mean, kind of asked permission. Well, no, I guess you said, hey, this is going to happen to you. I don't know that that's asking for permission.
That's not permission. That's telling someone you're going to do something.
It's going to happen. Okay, you know.
You know, and then when Mary said that she was blessed, blah, 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 that wasn't permission or consent. That was consignment. It was like, that's already done. I've been raised.
The insult that I had trolled with at one point was, you know, did she enjoy it or something like that, you know? And it was crude and, you know, rude, and didn't really prove anything.
Well, to be stupid, obviously she must have, because she had other children, supposedly.
Oh, well, yeah, with her husband, no, but I meant at the time that it was supposedly God doing it.
Well, yeah, but
like
she was
the only time in history that yelling out, "Oh God," would be correct, you know?
Right, exactly. But I used to take that about 20 steps, you know, farther, and I'd be like, so did God physically penetrate her? I mean,
well, you know, I mean, where would the sperm, you know, where would the DNA come from? Like, so did God take the DNA from Joseph and just teleport it over, or did it make its own DNA? Like, you know, and you have all these questions, and it's like, well, of course it wasn't virgin birth. That's the other thing. It's a young woman, not virgin. Virgin came in later.
Yeah, Alma. The word is Alma, and it's young maiden. It's not maiden. Virgin whatsoever.
Yeah. But it's assumed that she's a virgin because tradition, blah, I guess, you know. It's like,
because somebody mistranslated the word Alma in some version of a later manuscript. It became virgin.
Well, I think that might have been done possibly deliberately, because other religions around that time also had virginal births, so it made it, made it sink in with religions at the time. And that's something you see even in modern Christianity, where, like, okay, so Halloween, you know, All Saints Eve. So here's a pagan celebration that was adopted into, you know, being norm. But there was at least one church that I think was against Halloween that I went to, although I can't quite remember for 100% sure. But it's like, I feel like there was at this point. I don't know.
Oh
I went
well,
to a lot of churches. So.
our church was against Halloween, but the whole concept of trick or treating was for the kids, and the parents were like, they're just kids. They don't understand the whole deeper meaning behind Samhain and the jack-o'-lanterns and the purpose of dressing up in costumes.
Yeah.
It was a fun thing for children, and then as you got older, you were eventually educated onto the evils of Halloween.
But it's amazing the excuses that people will come up with to rationalize whatever. And I mean, it's kind of like, as I got older, I was like less wary or problems with D&D. I didn't think it was this horrible evil thing, but I never played it or anything. I played it a couple times, but very short sessions really. But I
was forbidden. I was forbidden.
Yeah, but I was like, I think by that time I was already an adult, so I was far removed from anything else. But I mean, I had Nintendo. That was my thing, But I think that we had some pen and paper. We would make some little like dungeon sort of things and play that way, my brother and I. And there's no big deal with that. It was like it was just because we had a net hack, and so we based it on that. And
right.
We didn't think about it. It's like but I also remember there was the whole Ouija board thing for a while, and and how evil that was, and how scary that was, and
the Ouija board was
the
Milton Bradley.
Yeah, Milton Bradley. Yeah,
that was a Milton Bradley invention to make money.
Well, it had been around before that, I think.
I don't think in the same version per se. I could be wrong. I could be talking out of my ass here. So
I'll
leave.
I don't remember offhand either. But at any rate, it's like, well, why would they put it out as a toy if it was, really evil and powerful? I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. But we
wasn't allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons. We wasn't allowed to read fantasy novels. For instance, J.R.R. Tolkien is forbidden. We wasn't allowed to listen to rock music. Wasn't allowed to go to dances. We wasn't allowed to. There was other things that was frowned upon, but it was kind of sort of accepted.
It sounds like a fundamentalist Baptist or something to me.
Southern Baptist. Yes.
Southern Baptist. See, I knew it. I could call it.
Yeah.
So you basically you read the Bible, but when you went to go serve, and thanks for your service, you really thought about this, and it kind of made you start questioning then, huh?
Well, every Christian at every step of the way has doubts. They have questions, and you're basically indoctrinated and trained to either reason the doubts away, ignore the doubts, or place the doubts in such a way that it's not really a doubt, but it is a mechanism of the devil to get you to stray from the path of righteousness.
It's like this is just to strengthen your faith. It's a test.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, just like Job was tempted, you'll be tempted, and doubt is a part of temptation. And as long as you keep and stick to your faith will be strengthened, and, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
The whole spiel. And
it's all to keep you locked into the system.
Right. Yeah. The majority of American Christians, in my experience, and my experience is limited, I'll admit, they have no idea that what the original languages of the Bible were. They didn't know that before the English Bible was created, there were so many different languages, and the English Bible really wasn't until late in the Christian belief system.
Oh yeah, the Catholic Church had a monopoly on the Latin Bible. They didn't want it translated to English.
Well, here's the thing.
It was really. I saw a whole documentary on it. It was amazing. With they would kill the person by like burning them at the stake, and then this one person, they were so pissed off at them, they dug up their bones and then burned the bones up. I'm like,
Sure.
well, man, they're really dead now. And now that actually was, I think at the time, because it was sort of a kind of leftover belief of the Jews that you came back from your bones, like your bodily resurrection needed your bones.
Southern Baptists believe that as well. It's not a spiritual resurrection. It's a
physical.
Bodily resurrection.
So you're physical. Cremation.
Exactly. Yeah. You're not allowed to be cremated.
So because they dug up this person's bones and burned those up, that person's not just dead. They're like super dead. They can't come back now.
They can't be. They can't be called to heaven.
Yeah, because God can't do that. I mean,
Well, God could, but He chooses not.
Yeah,
to.
right. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. But it was funny, and all these people who died to get the Bible translated to English, it was just a slew of people. It was just terrible.
Here's the interesting thing. When you ask the Christian who owns the copyrights to the Bible, okay,
they don't know that. Yeah, they should.
They don't realize that certain publishing companies own certain translations of the Bible.
Yeah. That's why the King James is used so often, is because it's a open market, or what do you call it?
No, it's not open market.
Is it?
The Queen of England owns the rights to the King James Bible.
Oh, I thought it was what is it?
No, it's not. It's not. Whatever.
Creative Commons or whatever the hell it's called. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever. When like the copyright falls away after so long. No. Yeah. The King James and all subsequent versions of the King James Bible is still owned by the Queen of England or the Crown, basically.
Wow.
Because King James was the one who commissioned the translation in the first place.
Yeah, that's the worst translation ever. And it's funny because, you've met those King James onlyists. It's like, oh, no. Right. Every time I would meet those, and I was a Christian at the time, it'd be like, really? Okay, whatever. It'd just be like, yeah.
Well, I mean...
public domain, thank you.
Public domain, exactly. Thanks, Shang. Shane. If it's Shane, am I getting it right? Yeah.
I don't know.
The public domain. There's very few Bibles in public domain. For instance, the Tyndale. There's certain instances of the Tyndale that is public domain, but Tyndale's owned by somebody. I forget who owns Tyndale. I don't remember. But the majority of the biblical translations you get today are owned by somebody, and one of the publishing companies that owns the Bible is what's that idiot's name? Oh, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. No, not none of them. Buffett or whoever owns this big, massive media conglomeration.
Oh, I don't. Yeah. Pat from the, what do you call it, 600 Club or whatever? No
event. No, it's a non-religious organization.
Oh, I don't know then.
Rupert Murdoch, exactly.
You Googled it. Come on.
Well, his company, Shane probably did, but it's that his Murdoch's company owns,
unless he knew that offhand, then I'm
publishing rights.
I'm bloody impressed.
Right. And because I have like.
So they're making some serious money on this thing.
Oh, sure. It's the world's #1 most best-selling book, next to porn.
So now here's the thought that I have, because I don't know if there's a copy of the Jefferson Bible anywhere.
You can find copies, but an actual copy that he himself made, I don't know.
No, I mean as far as like you go and pick it up at a bookstore or buy it online or something like that.
Oh, because I'm sure you could find it online.
If I wanted to publish my own version of the Bible, do I have to get permission from some nebulous thing to do that, or
if you use a certain translation as the basis, then yes.
So if I do my own, then I'm fine. Yeah, because I break copyright.
If you translate it from the original, the core manuscripts. There's no original
Amharic and
Greek, Aramaic, First Temple, Second Temple Hebrew. You know, you can't translate it from the Latin. That's a corrupted text as well. You can't translate it from the German. You can't translate it from anything other than the three original
that we
languages.
have. Yeah, the earliest ones. And yeah, I mean, I was talking about that a little bit earlier, where the scholars, you know, whatever it means to be a scholar, but they'll agree like First and Second Peter are just forgery.
Well, the consensus is First Peter, it was more than likely written by a Peter, or the Peter, but Second Peter's definitely not written by Peter. Hello? Anybody hear me? Get them away. Hello?
Well, Satan disconnected me.
Yep, that was definitely the devil.
That was God or somebody screwing me up. I don't know.
Yeah. What was I saying? Yeah, you have to use and a scholar. I mean, if you want to devote 20 years of your life studying a dead language, then have at it.
Yeah. All right.
You know, I'm going to go.
Yeah,
drink shit.
That's one of the biggest apologetic tropes that always kind of gets under my skin. It's like, well, the majority of biblical scholars all agree that blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, no, duh. They spent most of their lives studying this thing. Of course, they're going to think that it's significant. like, you know, it's going to be the rare minority, like Richard Carrier, that's going to say no to it. You know, and has invested a significant amount of time. It's just what's weird is the scholars don't want to seem to not want to look at his stuff. You know, it's like, well, why not? Why are you scared to look at what he said? It's very interesting, isn't it? So he can't get it peer reviewed because his peers, you know, are scared of what he has to say, maybe, or something, but they're not, you know, so it's kind of not a science there. There's kind of something off because scientists would be like, yeah, we'll peer review it. Yeah, sure, you know. But here you have, you know, because they're mostly Christians, mostly Catholics that are interested in the New or Old Testaments or whatever. So,
right. Well, you've got two possible reasons for this, and I think it's a combination of both. Number one, you can't do it because then you lose your power base. And number two, you can't do it because then you lose money. Nobody will no longer give the churches any money. It loses its functionality. It might still be a social construct, but it no longer holds the power that it once held. And the Catholic Church would be in some serious shit because they're the largest landowner on the planet besides the Queen of England, and they've got the most to lose.
What do you make of the myth? Do you think Jesus is a myth? I pretty much am convinced of that at this point. I mean, but it kind of doesn't matter in a way if there was a guy. But the point I go with is you don't need him to make the religion. And so I'm very, very close to mythicists at this point. Do you have any take on that or any?
Oh yeah, my thoughts on that is, who cares?
Yeah,
there could very well have been an actual Jesus, son of Mary, who started this rogue religion going against the grain. That's entirely possible, and I think it's more along the lines of a conglomeration of different characters sewn together. There could have been an actual, Yeshua ben Miriam. That's fine, and that's great, but that does not prove nor authenticate or validate
later, right?
Him being God.
Yeah, I don't. Well, the thing is, the important thing to me is you don't need a person to do that, because you can say that a person exists and you can get other people to go along with that idea. And this has been done in modern day, as far as like they'll do these studies where they, bring in the 3 actors and the 1 unknowing participant, and they'll say that the one line is the wrong length or whatever, and then the other person will start doing it. And then this one study took it a step further and had an actor leave and had in another unsuspecting person come in, and then they started picking it up, and then eventually they got to all new people that were not actors saying that at least one thing was completely wrong every time. And they interviewed them after, and they're like, "Did you know it was wrong?" I was like, "Yeah, but everybody was doing it, so I thought I was wrong."
Well, here's the thing. You could, Uncle Sam, if you ask some Americans, there was a real Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
Betty Crocker. There was an actual Betty Crocker, if you ask some people, because they don't know any better.
Johnny Appleseed.
Johnny Appleseed. Aunt Jemima.
Big, what was it? Big Jim or Big something. Big Red, something like that.
Big Ben, or whoever it was with the ox. Right. And then they'll be like, well, then if you say Jesus never existed, you can't say George Washington never existed.
I was like, no, because the thing, we have way better documentation, for one. And then, you can actually go and I think his bones are somewhere you could actually go to if you want.
Sure.
And that's the other funny thing is like, well, all these different churches claim to have whatever the disciples' bones are underneath, but they won't let anyone go look at them. So it's like, yeah, I don't believe you.
No.
So, you don't need it. You don't need the man, or you don't even need somebody named Jesus to make the religion about somebody named Jesus. That's my point. No. But I mean, ultimately it doesn't really matter. But just because I like to, know my place in the world, so to speak, it's like, well, what do I think is true based on what evidence there is? And it's like, yeah, I don't think this guy existed at all. Just because it's too, or if there was somebody, it's so far removed from what we're being told that it's not even that person anymore.
Right.
It's like if you started describing George Washington like Superman, you would be like, well, yeah, there might have been a George Washington, but he didn't do these things. So far removed from the person that it's not even them anymore,
Like the instance with George Washington and the cherry tree. I chopped it down. I cannot tell a lie. As far as we know, that never happened.
Right.
As far as we know.
Yeah.
But then again, we could, is it possible that he did that? Definitely. Why? Because I can take an axe, I can go chop down a tree, be it cherry or whatever, and I could say, I'm not lying, I chopped it down.
Yeah.
You don't have, you don't really have to know that or see that I'd done that to be like,
it wasn't George Washington made a tree spontaneously combust on fire.
And then talk to my uncle for 4.5 hours.
Yeah, and that's just like the thing is that there's a world of difference, and if you and so sometimes apologetics will go the route. Well, you start with the assumption that there's no God. No, you don't even have to start there. because there could be a God, but no magic. You know,
Sure.
there could be a God without miracles. Maybe it's a naturalistic God that has to use naturalistic methods. And they're like, well, but it's like, well, you could explain everything just about in the Bible with some naturalistic means if you tried hard enough. And they had done a study on the Red Sea.
Explain everything with naturalistic means.
Yeah, you could. They had done a thing with the Red Sea where they found this one part that was pretty shallow, and then this wind, if it came along at a certain speed, would dry it up so you could walk across. And they're like, well, maybe that's what happened. And I'm like, maybe, but you don't need that to happen to pretend that it happened. Like, you can just make up the story. You don't have to have it happen to make up the story. But here's a plausible naturalistic explanation. So if you're going to say, well, it really happened, well, then it happened naturally, not supernaturally, you know?
Yeah, but that defeated the purpose of my God was better than your God.
Yeah, exactly. And I had said to this one guy, I'd said, you know, that the whole Baal, the Baal test, you know, if we have a God that's unchanging, we should be able to pray to Baal and nothing will happen, and pray to Yahweh and instantly the thing lights on fire. So why are we not having that test? Well, because God doesn't want to be tested, but he allowed it to be tested back then. Yeah, but that was a one-time deal. So God does change. Well, you know.
Well, you know, you're not to test the Lord. My pastor used to tell me, and I used to tell the people that I preach to. But the thing of it is, you test the Lord all the time. If you pray to God and you ask for his intervention, you're testing him.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, and the other thing is you wouldn't really need to pray because it would already know what you were going to say anyways. So Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, I was thinking about that. There was also the Abraham Lincoln zombie movie or whatever. Yeah, but a book like Gone with the Wind could be actual history. But
sure.
Well, there's a couple of hints that it's not. If you read it and you didn't know, you didn't know. The narrative third person gives it away. When somebody is doing something that only they would know about and nobody else is in that room, it's an omnipotent narrator that's telling that story, because unless they say, and then I wrote down that I was in my room walking around trying on different clothes, unless there's a part where it takes pains to make clear that everybody is writing down what they're doing in every moment that you read about in the book, then it's got to be a narrator. And, well, then you ask, does that happen in the Bible? Yes. Happens, of course. Happens in the Bible. And the best one I point out is Jesus goes to the desert alone. And then, you know, the tempter shows up to tempt him. You know, you're a guy that you root for. You know? Nobody else is nobody's around. Who tells the story? Because nobody is there. There's no, you know. So does Jesus go back and brag to the disciples about what happened? No, he doesn't seem like that kind of guy. And it's not like they said, and then Jesus came back from being tempted and told us all about this, or I snuck into the desert to follow Jesus, or anything like that. Well, it's not there. It's just an omnipotent narrator. And there you go. It's a narration. It's a story. It didn't happen.
Exactly. Once a conversation is given, when the person who is retelling the conversation wasn't actually there, i.e., he was alone in the Garden of Gethsemane and called out to God, blah, 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 then it's a narrative and it is not an actual eyewitness fact.
Yeah,
and then, even, you know,
even if you have somebody say, well, they were inspired by God to write it down, so God was okay with bragging about Jesus being tempted in the desert. Like, I mean, come on, really? I mean, you know, you really, but then you have to ask, well, then what parts are told to them by God and what parts did they actually see happen? See, if they were told everything from God, then they saw nothing. Not that them seeing it would have been helpful, but there were no eyewitnesses to any of this. You know, if we went back in time to when this happened, we wouldn't find anybody doing any of these things. Just they wouldn't be there. We'd find people, you know, maybe hiding in caves, worshiping and making up stories. but we wouldn't find anybody walking around actually doing miracles. We might find people going around pretending to do miracles, or they might have known some sleight of hand. That's possible.
Probable.
It's probable. Yeah. I mean, I remember this documentary I saw on the what's his name? David Copperfield was saying, that he doesn't know how he still believes in God, because if he was back in the past, he could do things that they would think are miraculous. And it's like, yeah, so maybe you shouldn't believe then, But he's kind of like, woo-woo-y anyway, so,
Well, the biblical, correlations with the biblical stories. Thunder was this, storms were caused because of this, plagues were this and that. Back then, they didn't understand the seasonal shifts, weather, temperatures, the way cold air interacts with warm air. They didn't understand what caused rain. They didn't understand the actual science behind disease, sickness, epilepsy, hallucinations, anything like that. That they were primitive in every sense of the word. And eventually, as time went on and they did things that they probably wasn't supposed to do and learned more and more, they became less ignorant. And then these things fell away, and now we know what causes thunder. Now we know what causes epilepsy to a larger or lesser degree. We know how to make hallucinations happen. Yeah. We know what happens when the brain is diseased to a certain degree in a certain way, and we know what causes it. We might not understand a lot of the shit that we now know to the point where, because blah, blah, and the molecular structure of this and that, but we understand a million times more than they did.
Yeah, that's the other interesting thing is, like, apologists will sometimes appeal to the mysterious and be like, well, we can't explain consciousness, or we don't really know where we came from. And so, evolution doesn't talk about that. Like, yeah, I know, idiot. It's called abiogenesis. Hello, don't, stop doing that.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah, it's like, well, but they don't know, and abiogenesis isn't a settled science either. And it's like, okay, so let's pretend that tomorrow we find out all this stuff. What are you going to do then? Are you going to still believe in God? Yes, you are. So what's the point of appealing to these mysteries? There's no point in it. Because let's just say we absolutely knew the exact mechanism of the big expansion of the universe. Like we solved it, which I think we've gotten pretty darn close, but it's still kind of hard because physics breaks down and everything. But let's just say we solved it, and it's just like mathematical thing, because that's probably what it would look like. And it'd be like, oh, there you go. There's this thing, and you look at all these symbols, you have no idea what the hell they mean, because they're, complicated symbols, and you're like, okay, there's some math going on. I don't know what the hell's going on. It's like, that's there. That explains it. We call it, whatever, blah, And people are like, yeah, but what made blah happen? Nothing made blah happen. That's just what happened. Well, that doesn't make sense. It's like, okay,
Well, here's the issue. Christians are basically presuppositionalists.
Oh yeah.
They must have the presupposition of a non-corporeal, transcendent entity that is not beholden to the laws and guises of our universe. They must have this in order to make any arguments, to make any valid arguments for belief. Well, not really for belief. You can make stupid arguments that validates belief, but you get what I'm saying. They have to have this special case.
You want to go the intellectual route. You have to have sophisticated arguments. The problem with every argument I've encountered is they all have logical fallacies thus far, but that's not saying that there couldn't hypothetically be one that is fine. I haven't seen it yet. I'm still waiting. But yeah, I mean, well, I want to kind of wrap around back to where I started with this hangout, and then maybe I'd love to talk to you more some other time. But yeah, so what is it like to have faith? That was kind of the question I had in the beginning of this, and I was trying to explain to somebody, because there's a lot of atheists or skeptics or whatever you want to call yourself out there that have never had a belief in God. So I was trying to like be like put myself back in that, back in the past in my mind and explain what is it like to have faith? What was it like to have faith?
Well, there's two different faiths. There's the faith in what you know is not possible, but you hope is possible. And then there's faith in the reasonably real. Like you have faith you're going to start your car because 99 times beforehand you started your car and it has started. So you've got that basic that actual naturalistic faith that the mechanics behind whatever you're going to initiate or use will still be valid and hold true today. And then you have the kind of faith that goes against what you know is real. Like if you have cancer, for instance, you pray to God and you have faith that God is going to do this, or you have a hope against reality, or what you know just ain't so.
It's kind of like the bargaining part of acceptance of something, where you go through, denial, depression, bargaining, and all those steps. And praying to God is kind of that bargaining phase where you're trying to be like, look, I don't want this to be real. I want it to be different.
Right.
And with cancer, it might go away on its own. That happens. So it's this win-win where, well, either you're going to pray and it's going to go away, or you're going to die and then you're dead and you don't know. So either way, the God belief won because you didn't realize that it was false. You didn't see it fail in the way that you
Right.
would,
Well, even if it did fail, you would still have the same faith in it because you're hoping against hope.
Well,
You're putting your eggs in one basket, basically.
Yeah, and I guess that's where, when you say that, people go, well, no, what's wrong with that? Because it gives me hope for tomorrow. And that's kind of a tough one even for me to really address. It's like, well, it depends what, it's like, look, is faith in and of itself a good or bad thing, or does it depend? And it's like, well, yes, to all of that, right?
Well, it is a bad thing,
Yeah.
I think,
because you think it's always bad.
Yes, I do.
Huh? Okay.
Because I know my car is going to start, and if it doesn't start, I can figure out why it didn't start, and I can correct that problem, and then my car is going to start. But if you pray or you have faith in something that just ain't so, no matter what you do, it's going to be just not so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Like, that brings up a memory of mine, a story I could tell. That my pet bird I'd rescued this bird and raised it, and as part of our family, like our little pet, for a long time, and it had died, and I was really devastated. I was praying that God would just undo the day and reverse time and make it so that the bird wasn't dead, and God could do that. Well, it didn't happen. Didn't happen, even though I was crying my eyes out and praying my heart out and everything, however you want to put it. It didn't, I fell asleep finally. I think I missed school that day, but whatever, and just, the next day it's just like, here's the reality. The bird's still gone. And that, that feeling of loss and all that. And then later on, we had pet guinea pigs, and they had some kids, and one of them was a stillbirth. And the mother was actually, I think, eating on it. And I was like, no, don't do that. And I took it, and I was like, oh. And I put it in a box, and I buried it. Yeah, and I didn't pray for it this time. I didn't pray that God would undo it because I was more mature then, I think. But
exactly.
But I didn't, and it's funny because, again, I didn't even really necessarily think about God in that moment. I just thought, oh, this is sad, and okay, and, this is life, though. And so,
well, faith decreases the more you learn and the more you understand reality. And, you could argue philosophically.
I agree with that.
Anything.
Yeah.
Philosophically, anything is possible. God is entirely possible. Anything's possible philosophically.
Right.
But unfortunately, philosophy is nothing but a concept.
Yeah, it hits this wall where you have to turn to more rigorous things like science or logic or science,
Right.
you know, and people go, well, but you can't prove everything using science or logic. It's like, look, you know, I don't know that that's true, but it seems that these two things do a much better job than anything else that we've figured out so far, you know,
up until this point. Exactly.
Yeah, so you know, and the awesome thing with those things that we can know is that's really exciting. But it's also, there is an excitement there in the faith of, like you said, the things that you I don't know that you know that they can't be because you're hoping that they can be. You know?
Again, well, the Bible defined faith adequately for any and everybody, philosophically or realistically. Faith, you know,
hope of things,
the hope of things unseen and unknown and whatever. I don't know the exact wording.
I can't remember it offhand either. Hope of things we don't have, and but I think, well, you know, and then so but I do think that there's certainly the negative aspects of it because it's dangerous. I do think it is dangerous. The sort of blind faith that you're talking about, the sort of faith in the absurd happening.
Without a question. Yeah. Now, of course, there's a difference between having faith that the doctor you're going to is an adequate doctor.
I wouldn't even call that faith, you know, per se. I think that's where that's word
more of I can't even speak English at the moment. I don't live in America anymore. Colloquialism.
I can't say that word anyway, so it's all good. But but what was it like to feel faith? Or can we even describe that? I don't know.
Sure.
But
sure we can.
Yeah.
Take LSD.
I'm not going to recommend that to my viewers. Don't listen to this guy. He's a Satanist. Don't do it. Someone earlier had said something you might want to rebuttal. They said that the higher level magic was including sex or drugs. Was that correct? Or is that...
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, this? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
That was part of the ritualistic magic of the Satanic Church.
Okay.
That was one of the kicks of being a Levian Satanist in the 60s and in the early 70s, late 70s, because you got to hang out at the Church of Satan and you got to go to basically orgies. That's what it was.
All right. Got to join a Satanist church. Well, it's not going on anymore, right?
I have no clue. I've never been to a Satanist service. I've never bothered with it.
Mental note. Check in on this. See what's going on.
Hey, I tell you what.
That's something I could get in. I could get involved in that.
to put it bluntly, any blowjob's a good blowjob.
That's a good place to end this podcast, or whatever the hell we want to call this.
I even got a better one for you. Any orgasm not caused by your own hand is a good orgasm.
Wow. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Listen until we have logically coherent arguments or orgasms. You should be skeptical of the conclusions, I guess. I don't know how to end this. Goodbye, everybody. I'm hitting this button now.